Everybody, thanks very much for joining us today. I'm Andy, I'm the CTO of ANS, and I'd like to welcome you to our Pushing the Boundaries, Uncovering the Art of Possible with Microsoft Azure. This is part one in a four-part series of webinars that we're going to be talking about the power of the cloud. I'm going to be talking about different various organizations that are using the cloud, what the cloud's capable of doing, and it's really a big area now of topic for ANS, helping customers transform and navigate through digital and through cloud. And I'd like to invite Graham Chapman. It's very kind of him to join us today from Microsoft, who's the Health and Life Sciences Industry Solutions Executive, who's going to take us through a great presentation for the next 20-25 minutes. So I'd like to hand over to Graham.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Andy. So I'll just, if I may, do a quick introduction first. So I'm a Health and Life Sciences Industry Solutions Executive in Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft just come up, can you believe, for 18 years now. And just to put that into context, I started the year after the internet came into existence. And it's hard to believe that was in 1999. And if we look at what's happened to technology since then, I think, you know, it's quite clear that technology is just going to go exponential. And, you know, some of the stuff I've seen in the last few weeks and months in this new role has shown me that there's some fantastic stuff on its way. So I mentioned I'd come into a new team. About 18 months ago, Microsoft invested several $100 million in creating some new teams worldwide. We were very mindful of being more industry relevant, and we picked a number of industries we wanted to work more closely with. Very pleased to say that health and life sciences was one of those industries. It's interesting because technology in isolation has sort of a limited benefit, but it's incredibly powerful when it's part of service transformation as well. So what we want to do with our partners and customers is engage you on the service transformation discussion, and also look at how technology can help realize the full potential of that service transformation. So this is the sort of flow of the presentation today. You know, it's potentially around 15-20 minutes or so. We'll take some questions at the end if that's all right. It's always a little difficult to deal with questions as we're going through a webinar. It's a subset of a bigger presentation that I present out to our customers and partners. It's about 50% of that bigger presentation. But what it will hopefully do is give you a flavour of, you know, where Microsoft are in this space and where we see the change coming over the next few years. Let's move on. There we go. So this is our summary of the sort of trends that are happening in healthcare at the point in time. And these are very, very typical of what's happening worldwide. Certainly in the developed world. The developing world is very different, but in the developed world, it's these same 7 things that are happening everywhere. And this is where the pressure is coming onto our healthcare system. So what I want to do is, I don't want to take you through all of this, but I've got a couple of examples in here that just help reinforce some of the points that I made within these 7 trends. So the first one is around population. And you can see by the sort of graph on the screen that in the developed world, again, there is a huge disparity between young and old people. And we all know this. The number of 70 and 80-year-olds is growing at 10% a year, every year. So by 2050, we're going to see quite a dramatic change in the global population. There's actually, so aside from the fact that people get old and frail and they have more chronic conditions, there's actually 2 other sort of significant impacts that are sort of hidden within this discussion. I think the first one is that as people get older, the working population as a percentage of the overall population will decrease. And this means 2 things. Firstly, it's this working population that supply the healthcare workers to look after these elderly people, and this is going to reduce. And equally importantly, it's this working population that actually pay the taxes that pay for our public services. So we're going to see the amount of money coming into public sector decreasing, and at the same time seeing the demand for service increasing. So I've just got a very practical example of the impact of what I'm showing you here now. So I don't know if anybody on the call's ever been to Japan. I've never been fortunate enough to go to Japan. I've been out to the Far East a few times, but never to Japan. So when I mention the word or the country Japan, everybody has this picture in their mind of the huge amount of people in Japan and sort of density of buildings and traffic jams and everything else. A very, very much a developed country in the world. Japan has some 126 million people. Now, I appreciate that 500 years is quite a long time. It's half a millennium. But if you look at the birth and death rates in Japan, in 500 years' time, Japan will have no people left. Okay, that just gives you a magnitude as to what's happening in the developed world right now. So that's very much demand driven. If we look at supply, supply is an interesting space as well. So there's a huge problem coming around the supply of healthcare workers. I know we've seen a lot of stuff in the press very recently around Brexit and the fact that we're not getting healthcare workers, certainly from Europe, coming into the NHS to boost the supply of healthcare workers. It's not just Brexit. This is a worldwide problem in the world. As it says, there will be 13 million short by 2035. So when you look at that, this is non-sustainable. We can't continue to have the supply model that we have today. And as I get further through the presentation, I'm going to talk about something called channel shifting and how technology can play a huge role in that channel shift, which will allow healthcare workers to scale in a way that we've never seen before. Okay, so how can digital transformation make a difference? So you've probably seen this slide. Many people use this slide, and what it does is map out the big revolutions that have come in the world over the last few hundred years. And you'll note from the dates on here that every one of these revolutions has come about every 100 years. I live up in the Lancashire, and my kids are studying history at school, and going through the Industrial Revolution and what steam meant for sort of Greater Manchester and the Lancashire area, and it was sort of incredibly profound. Even when the railways came along, the example they used in class was it used to take, I think, 30 days for a canal boat to get from sort of Liverpool to Manchester with a load of goods on. The railways came along and they did it in a couple of hours. It just completely changed the way that industry worked up here. And every one of these revolutions you see here has had that same sort of profound effect. When we get to digital, digital, there's not that 100-year gap. It's near a sort of 50-year gap here. But we do believe that we're on the cusp of a next revolution here now at this point in time. And this is going to have a fundamental impact on how the world operates and certainly how healthcare is provided moving forwards. So digital and the power of public cloud, will fundamentally change healthcare. And let me just now delve into this in a little bit more detail for you. So this is what going digital means. And again, I often misread the data in these slides. You just got to be careful we put this in the right context. People often read the first item as 1 million per year. It's not 1 million per year, it's 1 million per hour of devices coming online by 2020. That's a phenomenal amount of devices, and obviously mobile phones have driven a lot of that growth in devices. The piece about the Standard & Poor and corporations is companies, on average, typically last 30 to 40 years. And it's interesting when you look at the Standard & Poor list of companies in the 1950s, there's only about 5% of those corporations are actually still in business today. Business hasn't got the longevity that you think it has. There are lots of disruptors out there, and people come and disrupt markets. And there is a huge need for people like Microsoft and ANS and all our partners to continually be disruptive and continually innovate. If we don't do this, we end up going out of business. It's quite simple. And the sort of last point in there on public cloud. Again, I'll come onto this in a second as well. But we're now seeing a significant increase in public cloud usage. Microsoft released its last set of quarter results about a week ago. Compared with the same quarter last year, we've seen a 98% increase in public cloud. And that's been repeated quarter on quarter for the last several years now. So public cloud's now becoming a utility, it's now becoming the norm for the future, and we expect by 2025 to see, upwards of 2/3 of all compute loads now being done in that public cloud space. So this is sort of Microsoft's Health and Life Sciences digital transformation strategy, and let me just talk you through this. So we can use digital and the power of the public cloud to impact onto the demand and supply challenges that we spoke about, or I spoke about earlier in the presentation. The public cloud has the ability to provide systems of record cheaper, faster, and better. Right-sizing systems and lifting and shifting them to the public cloud can have, immediate benefit and impact. And we're currently in the process with one large trust in the northwest of England, right-sizing and functionally checking that Tier 1 EMR to see if it will run and operate into Microsoft Azure, which is our public cloud. The public cloud was not, it was always a cloud for the sort of bits and pieces around the periphery. What we're now seeing is it's playing a fundamental role in the direct provision of Tier 1 clinical systems, and we'll start to see acceleration around this, and over the next few years we'll see more and more of those critical workloads sort of moving off into the public cloud. So when I say it's cheaper, faster, and better, what exactly do I mean by that? The cheaper piece, there's a big piece of this around right sizing, and what we've found with this particular example I referred to is that people tend to oversize infrastructure because they're frightened of not being able to accommodate future load. The interesting piece with the public cloud is the ability to sort of burst demand, if that makes sense, where we can take a system, we can right size it, and then if spikes in demand come, we just immediately provision more infrastructure. There's an immediate saving to be had there. The faster is around provisioning. Public cloud provisions virtual machines in around 8 minutes. So there's none of the ordering cycles and the provisioning of hardware. The better piece is very much around cybersecurity now. We're at the point now where the investment and control that's required around cybersecurity is so demanding that it's really only the big public cloud providers that I think are going to have the capability to do this stuff moving forwards. So that's sort of the state of what you do today. The interesting pieces come around moving into the world of accountable care. So lots of stuff written about accountable care systems and sustainability and transformation programs and all of that transformation space that the NHS talks about today. The public cloud has two interesting roles to play in this. I think the first one is around what we call systems of insight. And what I mean by systems of insight, this is taking data sets to do two things. One is to improve operational performance, but the real interesting one is taking large complex data sets, including public data sets, to do population health management and in particular clinical and financial risk stratification. So the healthcare system today is very much based around, when people get ill, we look after them incredibly well. What the future will need to do is to go out into the population, find the outliers, find the potential high demand users, and start to predict who they'll be so we can provision healthcare in a different way moving forwards. Now that prediction will be demand planning on a population level, it'll also be what next best action can we take on that individual to actually change the clinical outcome. The bottom box, the systems of engagement piece, is how we digitally engage the citizen in a different way. So when you look at what goes on in finance, you look at what goes on in retail, it's a fully digital interaction. We're not quite there yet with healthcare. I would argue in other parts of the public sector we are. I just renewed my passport and I've just got a new picture driving license. That was all an online and digital engagement. Healthcare has still got some steps to take. I think it's a developing area for all of us. But when you look at the potential for the Internet of Things and that whole space, we can start to see more and more of that technology coming into the healthcare space over the coming years. The supply piece on the right-hand side, and I referred to channel shifting when I spoke a few slides ago. So what I mean by channel shifting, so when you look at the NHS today, we have many interactions which are done on a one-to-one basis. You know, outpatients, GP appointments are all prime examples of where an individual will come in and have a one-to-one interaction even with a clinician. Channel shifting is around two things to us. The first thing is, how do we use digital means to change how that interaction happens? And technology-wise, that means e-consultation. So how do we use the Skype for Business technology and the other platforms out there to have a video or a voice conversation as opposed to a physical one-to-one interaction with citizens and patients? Look at other parts of the world, particularly up in Scandinavia. They've done this in quite a significant way now. Very dispersed populations up there, and they've had no choice but to do this in this way. That electronic interaction has the ability to fundamentally change how we provision healthcare. The other interesting piece around channel shifting is moving away from the one-to-one model to potentially a one-to-many model. And I was reading some interesting papers around some of the work that's been done in Africa. Again, Africa doesn't have specialist healthcare teams that are on your doorstep. What they've had to do is use channel shifting to provide one-to-many interactions. So as an example, they've done some interesting work around people who all have heart failure. They will tend to put them all in the room together, and then they will have a one clinician to a many patient interaction with that community. It's an interesting sort of thought process, and I guess the benefits that brings is it gives you that scale mechanism. But the other interesting pieces does as well is create a community of people with a particular disease type. And you know, evidence has shown that putting people together with particular diseases and allow them to talk and interact with each other actually gives a better outcome for those citizens. So again, this is the other big thing I think the NHS is going to have to start thinking about, is how we scale that limited supply base moving forwards. So we know I've referenced the public cloud on a number of occasions over the last few minutes, and you know, I say unashamedly, it's a huge strategic direction for Microsoft. You know, 90+% of our investment is all going into the public cloud. Over the last few years, we've invested the best part of $19 billion now in building out a hugely scalable public cloud infrastructure. The reason we've done that is because we believe the only way to deliver this whole system change is with a public cloud. The programs I've described will put together shared records and substantial data sets. There'll be a strong requirement for regional identity, substantial compute and storage capability, and artificial intelligence. These four pillars represent the differentiators of our public cloud offering that Microsoft Azure brings to the marketplace. Taking you through all of these areas is another complete presentation, but I would like to spend a little time on the trusted element and its relevance to you today. I'm hoping you guys have all seen this announcement that came out of NHS Digital about 2 weeks ago, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking you through this. So there has always been a huge reticence within particularly healthcare around information governance and privacy, and we absolutely get this and we understand it fully. The most often comment that's been shared with me when I've spoken to NHS customers is, we're very interested in the public cloud and we see its benefit, but the statement back was, nobody has ever told us we can do this. So we've been working very closely with NHS England, Department of Health and NHS Digital around getting some updated guidance around the use of public cloud for the NHS, and in particular patient identifiable data. And we're very pleased to say this announcement came, as I said, a couple of weeks ago. It's been a year in the making. It should have been out around this time last year. The general election got in the way, which delayed things a little. And then, went to Jeremy Hunt, and it's been to the Information Commissioner's Office. But we're pleased to say that the guidance is now there, and it's exactly what we were looking for from NHS Digital. For those of you who haven't read this, what it says in essence is, subject to you going through the correct privacy and risk assessments, which you have to do for everything you do because of the nature of your business, you are then fine to look at putting that patient identifiable data into the public cloud within the European Economic Community. Okay, so what does this mean now? So what has this opened up to us? So what I've done with this slide is start to put a little bit more detail onto the strategy in terms of the 3 pillars that I described before: the systems of record, insight, and engagement. So as I said before, the first element is to work with our partners to move systems of record to the public cloud. And as I said before, this lift and shift activity, as we call it, will provide better, faster, and cheaper healthcare systems. The second element is to apply artificial intelligence, and particularly machine learning, to complex data sets to provide clinical and financial risk stratification. Data I've seen around this, if you get around 2 years worth of historical data, you can start to predict some events 5 years out now. And I know there's one of our partners done some very clever work around predicting the probability of heart disease 5 years away. I mean, that's huge, because if you can start to predict things 5 years out, you can start to put health and wellness programs down that actually stop those people having heart disease. And that has a huge impact on, particularly onto primary and secondary care. We spoke a little bit about the systems of engagement. I mean, this is digitally engaging the citizen, as I said before, and these are some of the areas that we're working in at the moment. And you can see the sort of light blue things within the black boxes here. Wearables have come on a lot, and I think what's important here is we're seeing wearables now that are CE certified, which is very, very important. We spoke a lot about virtual health and the supply challenges. And the other big thing that we're getting very, very engaged in right now is omnics. And most people say, what do you mean by omnics? So omnics is genomics, it's proteomics, it's that whole DNA space. There is a lot of ongoing debate at the moment when you read the journals around the whole genetic space. There was a paper a few weeks ago around cancer that was suggesting that actually lifestyle is the biggest determining factor in cancer, not necessarily genomics. But that whole personalized medicine space is incredibly exciting and incredibly interesting to us, because we really can see how we can start to use people's genetics, maybe with that lifestyle data from EMRs and social care records, to start to put some very complicated personalized care plans down for patients. So you see on the right hand side of that diagram, I sort of started to split out some of those public cloud workloads in this. If you look at the systems of record, that's basic infrastructure, compute, storage, networking, security. The bit that's above that are what we call premium cloud workloads, or some people refer them to as advanced workloads. This is the real innovation in that public cloud. It's really going to drive the things that sit to the left-hand side of those services. This is where most of our investment is going. We're at a point with the core infrastructure now where it's been a race to the bottom on price. I think we've got to that base point on technology as it is today. And yes, we may get some new stuff coming out over the years that changes that boundary again. But where we are right now is potential the loads it's going to get. And just to reinforce that, we have something called power utilization effectiveness, which is basically a measure between the energy input to a compute system and then the compute you get out of that system. Where we are with our data centers now, we're now down to 1.06 PUE. So that means we put 1.06 kilowatts in and we get 1 kilowatt out. The only way we're going to get more efficiency out of that system today is to drop the circuit boards into mineral oil and extract the little bit of heat that comes off the components in the circuit boards. So as you can see, we've hit a low point on infrastructure. The real value comes from the services that sit on top of there, and they're actually the real things that do transformation, and they're the bits that we're working very closely with our partner community on. We're building a portfolio of solutions out that do the systems of insight and systems of engagement pieces. Okay, let me just talk through. I've got 2 references to conclude, and then I've got a short video which runs for about 2 to 3 minutes that just shows the power of some of those advanced workloads and where our thinking lies around the adoption of public cloud. So let's take this first one. This is EpiMed, and you'll see EpiMed referenced in the video as well. So EpiMed Solutions provide clinical information management on the cloud, specializing in healthcare analytics and strategic decision support tools. Its systems are in over 400 hospitals throughout Brazil, with 800 plus ICUs and 11,000 monitored beds, with a total of over 1.2 million patients in their database. It is the largest clinical and epidemiological database in Latin America. The challenge was to reduce hospital-acquired infections and mortality rates in Brazilian hospitals and to optimize their clinical and operational effectiveness in their ICUs. The EpiMed system uses Azure machine learning to support predictive analytics and near real-time display of trends and problem areas. Hospital-acquired infection and mortality rates were significantly reduced. ICUs became more efficient, producing results comparable to a 30% increase in hospital beds. Clinicians can better leverage their time and skills to improve the care and outcome for patients. So AIR, and this stands for Assistance in Recovery, is an international provider of disease management and telephone-based care coordination solutions for chronic behavioral health conditions. The IR model needs to focus on a fast initiation of care whilst also helping the family cope. In so doing, they increase the rates of recovery for those struggling to overcome addiction or behavioral health issues. AIR is now planning, coordinating and personalised care for its clients using TrialBridge Health 360 care coordination, which is all built on Microsoft Cloud technology. Their efforts using Microsoft Cloud technology strive to increase the rates of recovery for those struggling to overcome addiction or behavioural health issues. Okay, so they're 2 of many, many references we've got around how we're providing transformation for healthcare on the public cloud. I'm just going to play you a video now. So just a sort of slight word of caution, there's a little bit of lag on some of the video just because we're playing this across a webinar, and you might find that some of the voice is slightly out of sync with what's on the screen, but just bear with that. There's some fantastic stories in the video. So let me run that for you right now.
everywhere. Breathtaking. The things we can do now, the problems we can solve, hundreds of thousands of users, millions of citizens. This is about people. That's what brings digital transformation to life. So you give it a tag like digital transformation and everyone presumes it's all very sterile and very computer-oriented, on, off, black, white, but actually it's really about making the interactions more personal, more human.
That app became this seamless piece to his care.
But the fact that technology can play just a little small part in helping deliver more real-time knowledge of what's really going on inside this incredibly complex human machine that is Winston, that is beautiful.
This technology literally saved his life.
Technology itself is not the star. Whoever's technology it is, it's how it empowers.
Like a vital sign. Let's take pictures of the back of your eye. In Azure, our systems are running.
So instead of saying, hey, in a couple of years you'll go blind unless you make a change, we can say, hey, we can stop this now and we can make a difference.
It's just extraordinary. The cloud enables workloads that we haven't been able to consider before.
In the next 5 years, EpiMed in 10 to 15 countries.
The scale of their ambition was so big. The way they wanted to bring all of this data together and not just do it in one place, but do it across multiple ICUs. The cloud is the only way you can do that.
We've done a lot of taking paper to digital, but we haven't really changed how we deliver healthcare, and that's what digital transformation is.
The difference assessing a patient was amazing the first time we used it.
A service which enabled the nurse, the patient, the doctor to have this high fidelity as if they're communication without the need for them all to be in the same place.
They need information on the go. They can now get that information in the palm of their hand.
The data that we are dealing with is deeply personal. You have to be able to answer the question of, is my data private and secure? Digital transformation isn't just something that happens in the hospital. It's really about the human experience. The power of all of this is how it merges together with the amazing knowledge and art of delivering medicine today.
Okay, so thank you. That's the end of the presentation. You know, very happy to bring Andy back in as well, and we're very happy to take any questions or have any discussion around the content of today or anything else you want to raise, I guess, as well.
Yeah, of course. If anyone wants to put anything in the chat, then that'd be a really good way of sort of moderating that, and we'll give people a couple of minutes to maybe do that. But I'd like to thank you very much for your insights, Graham. It's been a really nice half an hour to share what you know on the healthcare space, and certainly with what Microsoft is doing. I know ANS is now helping a lot of organisations in healthcare space looking at their move to Azure specifically and their move into cloud computing. I think that guidance that was released 2 weeks ago has really started to jog people into thinking about, actually, my next technology refresh will be an adoption of cloud. So that's a big area for us moving forward and a big bet for us this year. And we see more and more NHS trust approaches now and start to transform the way that they not only deliver operations but are thinking about IT and healthcare. So just being, you know, a series 1 in the 4-part webinar, there's a lot more that delves into that now for people on the call if you want to join us later down the line. But I think that's an inspirational video at the end, and certainly a good glimpse of what's now capable with digital and with the cloud. So I'll just give it, Graham, if it's all right with you, we'll give it 30 seconds and just see if anyone's going to pop anything on the chat.
Of course, yes.
If that's okay, yeah, so we won't go silent for a sec.
I was going to say, don't be shy, speak up, it's fine.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes hard on webinars, but you know, your comments are.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'll just kick one off while people are doing that, Graham, if that's okay. What do you think? Certainly, with your healthcare experience and such a broad portfolio of knowledge that you've got across sort of different sectors in the UK and from what you were saying across the world. What do you think one of the NHS's biggest challenges is specifically to actually get into this? You know, you talked about channel shift and the move to digital. What are a couple of things that you see might be a challenge that if you wanted to sort of inspire someone that was working in an IT department or working in a digital department in the NHS, what would be a good place to start? You know, how would you sort of approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two answers to that. I think the big thing in business in general is always the change process. You know, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times during the last half an hour, that technology is not the issue. The issue is how we do service transformation. So how do we get clinicians to accept that they maybe have to work in a different way than the way they've worked before, and actually implementing that change process is where all the complexity comes. You know, again, just to repeat a comment, the technology helps enable that change in process or that transformation. It isn't the thing that actually makes the change. The change comes from the people in the process within clinical care. I think from an IT perspective, I think the challenge is around, a lot of it's financial, and everybody on the call will understand that, you know, public sector in particular, healthcare has been very much capital funded over the years, and large chunks of money come to buy things. The public cloud model is very much revenue in its orientation, and because of that, it can be a little variable, and that does, or we have seen that cause people some consternation at times. It's one of those where we will lower the cost. However, there will be a degree of variability in that lowering, and you know, we're working very closely with finance teams and with operational teams to understand how we sort of mitigate that position a little bit for the NHS.
Yeah, of course. We have a couple of customers, NHS customers, that are in the cloud, and that's one barrier that they've certainly had to overcome. But there's a couple of case studies out there on ANS's website if anyone wants to contact about those, on how those organisations have done that and started to move to a much more revenue-based model. You know, sometimes in some cases, not all systems are in the cloud. There's a good couple of NHS trusts out there that we work with that have got a good significant amount of clinical systems running in the cloud now, and they've been making that transition over the last 12 months. So there's a lot we can talk about there on the next webinar as well. But I think you're right. I think there's some sort of past can govern future, and really big cultural change for some organisations to be able to move into the new model. But what we are finding is incredibly exciting, and some of the things that the trusts are doing, you know, changing that operational model and modernising the way they work internally and the way they approach IT is having some real significant benefits. So I think, Graham, there that you've probably answered most things. People are shy on the chat. That's okay. And I don't think we've got anything through. So I think on that note, and because we're pretty much on time, we'll probably say thanks and goodbye to everyone on the call. So I'd like to thank you personally, Graham. It was very nice of you to give out to give 40 minutes of your time up to do that, and I'd like to thank everyone on the call who's joined us today and taken 40 minutes out of the time to listen to that, and hopefully we'll see you again on the next webinar.
Yeah, and just one final comment, Andy. Thank you for the sponsorship and the opportunity.
No problem.
As you guys on the call can see, you've got both mine and Andy's contact details. If there's anything you require specific follow-up on, then I know I speak for you as well, Andy. Please reach out to us, and we'll do our very best to come back to you in the shortest possible time frame.
Of course.
All right.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.